Hey folks, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel. And in the day that the Thousand Sons Codex finally gets released from 9th edition, Games Workshop have given us a little bit more insight into what to expect from our beloved new codex. It comes out in just a couple of hours time after this video goes live for pre-order and will be available the following weekend. So looking forward to rushing online, sitting in the queue, and hoping I can snag my copy just in time. So in this video we're going to go through those changes that have been announced on the community page and have a little think about what that could mean for our Dusty Boys. So let's get straight into the video. The first update to the rules that we're seeing is called Mere Servants. Now this was completely expected following on from the Death Guard rule, which was very similarly phrased in Diseased Minions. So for Death Guard it meant that you couldn't take more Plague Followers or Poxwalker units than you could Bubonic Astartes Core Infantry. So exactly the same as followed on with the Thousand Sons is that we cannot include more Cultist units than we do Rubric and Scarab Occult Terminators in our detachment, and equally, very similar to the Poxwalker thing, we can't include units with the Bray keyword more than we can with Rubric and Scarab Occult Terminators. So that's going to include, obviously, all of our Zangor type units as well as our Cultist units. So what do I think of that? I'm not too fussed about that, to be honest. I didn't really run a Zangor heavy list on the whole. I did for occasions for a bit of fun. But on the whole, I've only actually owned 10 cultists, so that was never really a thing. I'd include one unit for a backfield objective maybe, but they never did anything. They just used to hide, and that was that. And then Bray units, yeah, I like to play around with Zangor units, but given the new Cabal rules, we're going to want lots of sorcerers or aspiring sorcerers to add to our Cabal points for our Kabbalistic focus. So I'm probably not too upset. I probably still would want to run some of those screening type units or sort of sneaky hide objective type units, but on the whole it was completely expected, so I'm not upset about this. Next up is the big one. It's the long awaited confirmation that we are getting 3 wound Terminators and 2 wound Rubric Marines. We kind of knew that was coming. That had been told that we were going to get that before. We were hoping we were going to get that in like an FAQ interim kind of thing. But they kept insisting it was going to come along when we finally got our codex, and we finally have that confirmation. Equally, one of the other things we thought might disappear was All Is Dust and be rewritten a little bit in comparison to things like Disgustingly Resilient, which was for the Death Guard. All Is Dust does remain, but one key difference is that they now have said that we add 1 to any armor saving throw. Previously, it was add 1 to your saving throw, so that would include invulnerable saves. Now, so it is a bit of a nerf, but with the additional wounds, it's a difficult one to say how nerfed it really is. I'd love to have been including with invulnerable saves like pretty much everyone else who plays this army. But alas, no longer. So all damage 1 weapons, we get that +1 to our armor saving only, not invulnerable. But equally, we still keep our no penalty to hit rolls when we move with our heavy weapons. So Soul Reaper cannons and so on are not going to be impacted whilst we chug along the battlefield. I think the next most wanted thing on most Thousand Sons players' shopping list or Christmas list was Arcane Automata, which means we are fearless. No more running away, no more losing very expensive models when you fail those tests. Yeah, something we've wanted for a long time, and we've got it. So yeah, no worrying about morale and no losing very expensive models. That is awesome. That is obviously only going to apply to our core units though, so it's not every single unit in the army is going to be fearless. It's pretty much going to be your Rubrics and Scarab Occult Terminators. Sticking with our beloved Scarab Occult, we do have a major upgrade to our former power weapons with the Prosperine Khopesh. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. Prosperine Khopesh. That sounds about right to me. Yeah, previously we just had standard power weapons, which were strength as user, so we were strength 4 with an AP -3 and 1 damage. The new weapons are a bit more hench. We are now strength 5, still remaining AP -3, which is pretty good, but double damage is massive. Having 2 damage finally means our Terminators have some hitting power. Now add that to the fact we're also getting +1 attack for the Scarab Occult Terminators. They now have 3 attacks apiece with those Prosperiron weapons. That is going to be pretty good. Yes, they are still slow. They're still going to struggle to get potentially into combat. But at least they are a bit more fearsome when they do get there now. Sticking slightly with the Terminators here, but equally as good for our Rubric Marines, is the Soul Reaper Cannon. That's been given a bit of a buff as well with its rate of fire and its strength. I was originally hoping this was going to be a damage 2 weapon like a Heavy Bolter and still remain at a lower rate of fire. But you know what? It is what it is, and otherwise it's just too much of a cookie cutter across the board. So the Soul Reaper Cannon, range 24, heavy 5, strength 6, AP -3 and 1 damage. Kind of means it might be worth considering. There was a lot of times, especially once we had the Ritual of the Damned out, where, do you know what, just sticking with your combi bolters and your Inferno bolt guns was actually the better option because of the way that the stratagems worked for double firing those weapons. This now means that it's probably going to be a viable option. It's still remaining a fairly cheap option to upgrade. I have assembled quite a few of these for my rubrics, and equally I always take them in my Scarab Occult. So, you know what, I'm all happy with that. We've also had an insight now into a couple of the new stratagems as well. Well, I say new. One of them's new, one of them's a rewording. So the first one is Unwavering Phalanx, and this is to reduce damage coming into either your Thousand Sons Rubric Marines or Thousand Sons Scarab Occult Terminators. A lot of other armies have got similar kinds of rules now. There is an ability somewhere to mitigate damage in some way by subtracting 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack. The specifically good thing about this one, even though the 1 CP, 3 CP thing is debatable, is that that will then kick off all his dust. So it reduces the damage characteristic, which allows all his dust to work, which basically means that this will stack as two combination rules, which is not a bad thing. This is great for when you've got 5 or fewer models, but it's going to cost 3 CP if you've got more than that. So if you're going to take units of 10 Terminators, units of 10 Rubrics, it's going to cost you 3 CP. Now, I know with the increased wound count, is this going to be a big thing? And again, going back to the Kabbalistic focus stuff, are you going to want to take multiple units of 5-man rubrics, for example, to get 2 extra, or 1 extra sorcerer in there for 1 extra Cabal point? That's still to come out in the wash for me once we get a few games under our belts and we see what the community's doing with a few games and a few results and see how that stacks. But I suspect we'll see smaller squads of rubrics and Scarab Occults than we might have done under the old Codex in 9th edition. 20-man rubric blobs with teleportation was pretty much what we hedged our bets on before. Not so much now, but yeah, it's a 50-50 one for me. 3 CP might be 1 CP too many for my liking, but I can see why we're going in that direction for those balanced perspectives. And equally, we also know from the Munitorum Field Manual, we can't take 20-man units of rubrics anymore. They are maxed out at 10. So yeah, are we going to see those 20-man immovable blobs again? Obviously not. Next up is a big bone of contention, or the Wrath of the Wronged, which is basically the reworded version of Veterans of the Long War. So Veterans of the Long War used to cost 1 command point, and any Thousand Sons infantry unit selected to attack in a shooting or fight phase add 1 to the wound roll made for that unit until the end of the phase. This is now doubled in CP and is specific for Arcane Astartes infantry only. So I've got a funny feeling that Bray units are not going to be Arcane Astartes, very much similar to Death Guard. They do not have the bubonic Astartes keyword in their cultists and poxwalkers. So I used to quite like using veterans with a big blob of Zangors before, especially with a shaman buff as well. But it looks like for 2 CP now, so double the CP and half the choices that you can put it on, we're going to get that add 1 to the attacks wound roll for just our Arcane Astartes infantry units. So yeah, I think that's taken away a little bit from what we had before. But again, it's all got to be taken in a larger picture. I see a lot of people online that instantly say, right, that's it, we're rubbish tier again because of one of our favoured stratagems is now double CP, can be used on less units. we haven't got the big picture yet. We haven't got the whole picture, and we won't have that realistically until next weekend. So it's one of those things. Right now, looks not as good as we were hoping for, but let's see that total picture before we cast judgment. Finally, then, in the last of today's teasers we were given by the Warhammer community team is one of the abilities for the Infernal Master, which is called Malefic Malstrom. So again, this is, if you hadn't seen the other day's video, basically an Infernal Master is kind of like a chaplain sorcerer, and he's going to have the ability to make successful pacts, which we believe, well, I certainly believe, is going to be rolled off in a similar way, the way that a chaplain rolls for his fancy abilities. If it's successful, then select one friendly Thousand Sons unit within 24 inches and visible to the Infernal Master, and until the start of your next command phase, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, add 1 to the strength characteristic. I can see a lot of shenanigans going on with this one, because it's not just infantry models or, you know, regular type weapons that you might see. You could end up putting that onto, say, a Chaos Predator with loads of heavy bolters. You could be putting it onto lash cannons on a Land Raider to make them strength 10. You could be putting them on a Forge Fiend on the Hades auto cannons and buffing those up as well. So it's not just going to be an Infanteer kind of thing, although strength 5 Inferno bolt guns is going to be quite tasty, and equally strength 5 Warp Flamers is going to be very, very tasty. I can see some interesting combinations coming out relying on something like that one. So yeah, we haven't seen all of what the Infernal Master can do yet, but adding 1 to strength characteristics of attacks, especially with a lot of units getting strength or toughness buff, like the regular Orc Boy is going to toughness 5 now. Your strength 4 weaponry will benefit from being strength 5. That will be nice. But I can see some interesting combos coming out with that on various different other ranged weapons. So there we go then, folks. That is the rundown on today's teasers from the Warhammer community on the Thousand Sons Codex. As I said, when this video goes out, it'll only be a couple of hours till we can pre-order our own copy, and then wait agonisingly a whole week until we can actually get our hands on it. Although I'm sure various larger influencers have already got their copy, and we might see some bat reps dropping throughout the weekend, so we can get a good idea of what's going on. And I'm sure some of them will be blatantly Twitch streaming there or putting it on their own YouTube channels, showing whatever all the rules are. So yeah, looking forward to having some sneak peeks of what's going on. My opinion so far on the teasers just from today are actually quite positive. I know that Veterans renaming is going to irk a few people, but got to remember to take it in context. We've only got that very small view so far of what the changes are, and we need to take it in conjunction with the rest of the codex as well. Really looking forward to seeing these new psychic powers. That's where the Thousand Sons excel. That's where we need to dominate that particular phase out of all of the phases in the game. So yeah, we need to make sure that we can unpack some serious whoop-ass during that phase. So many armies these days are getting denies to mortal wounds and so on, so we need to make sure that we can perhaps use other complementary powers rather than trying to mortal wound the enemy off the board. Lots of buffing, defensive, more offensive powers that can bring in other aspects of the game to help us score secondary objectives, take those primaries and just work the board a little bit better rather than just trying to barrage with mind bullets all the way through. Which seems to be a quite common theme from what I could tell in various games that I've watched over the last couple of years. So let's see what happens. And to be honest, I was guilty of that very early on in 8th edition, facing Deathwing, and their Terminators just all fell apart from mortal wounds. So yeah, let's hope that this small teaser extrapolated with the rest of the book really does work. I don't want us to be, you know, the next Adeptus Mechanicus with super cheap infantry that can get 2+ saves and all that kind of shenanigans that's been going on. I want it to be balanced and respected as a standalone without a gazillion FAQs that are going to be needed to be released because the competitive meta just goes mental for it on day one. I don't want to see that. I don't think any true Thousand Sons fan wants to see that. In fact, I don't think any faction fan of any of their factions want to see too much easy dominance. We want a reasonably fair game that relies a little bit on skill and a little bit on luck, and that's That's hopefully what we're going to get out of this codex, but we say that every time. As usual, I'd love to hear your comments on these teasers. Are you getting the book tomorrow? Are you getting, or later today, because I'm recording this on Friday, are you getting Hexfire? What do you think of those teasers so far? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. But I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you folks on the next video.